Welcome to Digital Asset News. Take the top stories in cryptocurrency and digital assets and break them down into bite-sized pieces. Today we have some thought-provoking stories to go over. First up, Bitcoin will create a new economic elite in 2020 and how I see parallels for cryptocurrency and digital assets in 2020 as to the internet back in the early 2000s. Also, lastly, we'll go over Bitcoin's role in the digital economy. It'll be bettered by central bank digital coin development. And really what we're going to look at is a report that was just put out by Greyscale where they talk about what could potentially happen with the CBDCs coming out and how it will enhance the effects of Bitcoin. And lastly, I want to go over a channel that I recommend because I think it's a great piece of information, but we'll go over that at the very last part. So first up, Bitcoin will create a new economic elite in 2020. This is a really good article written by Jonathan Long. I hope I say his name right. So first off, who's this guy writing an article? So Jonathan, I have no idea who this guy was actually, is the CEO and co-founder of BTC with more than 20 years of experience in developing high-performance, mission-critical systems. For the past 6 years, he built many successful ventures by fusing his deep knowledge of technology with business opportunities. I like that kind of guy. That's a guy who does things, does business just like me. So I thought this would be a pretty good article. And before we get started, in the 2000s, a new economic elite actually sprang up in California, in Palo Alto to be specific. And that was where the Googles and the Facebooks and the YouTubes kind of sprang up. And you can see that on this handy dandy map, right in a very small piece of area, or Silicon Valley. You got YouTube, Oracle, Facebook, Stanford's there, NASA, but they've been around for a while. Yahoo, Google, Apple, eBay. I mean, all those different, of course, Apple was around for a long time, but the big tech companies just kind of sprang up, and it was all in one centralized location, and it was the very early part of the 2000s, because the internet came around in the mid to late 90s, and it was interesting to see, because now there is a concentration of power and money in that area. Back then, it was just a fine little time for these little businesses to start up, and people looked at them like they were just some little tiny startups that wouldn't go anywhere. And even Warren Buffett passed on Google because he couldn't understand it, and he also passed on Bitcoin. So I see a lot of parallels with what happened in the early days of the internet to what is happening right now. And to further expand on that, and it just took time for people to understand the internet. It will take time for people to understand blockchain, Bitcoin, and all other digital assets and cryptocurrency. I mean, it's just going to be a little bit of a learning curve. Look, I was around when the internet came out, and first of all, it was a pain in the butt to actually use. There was dial-up, and if you kids know what I'm talking about, then you've been around for a while. If you don't, then congratulations, because dial-up was awful. You had to sit around and wait, and it was like a download speed of like 1 megabytes per second. If you wanted to take a look at a picture, it would take you like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to download a picture, and it was just awful. But of course, things expanded, things got better. People who didn't understand it back then, now everybody uses it, and I see the same parallels with what's happening today. So what I want you to do is I want to take a little time trip, because when I talk about this, I don't think people really understand how different the world was back then and how people were just so confused with this new technology, because today it's just like commonplace. You open up your computer, you log on, there's internet access everywhere. Well, back then it was hard to wrap your mind around that because it had never existed. So how would you know? So this, if you weren't around then, this is going to make a lot of sense and kind of bring you up to speed of what is actually happening now and what happened then.
Prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Kay said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard you around big fight in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like
We're
a
looking at the
computer
dictionary.
billboard.
It's not an. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide. It's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I was
But you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate
No,
internet.
no.
So just right there, when you heard that whole exchange, that was from 1994, the Today Show. That was Brian Gumbel and Katie Couric. I forget the lady's name, but can you see the parallels now from what you have as far as conversations with your friends and family and people you know around, and you talk about Bitcoin? What is that? Or what is cryptocurrency? What is digital assets? Well, it's made in a blockchain. Well, is it like a currency? How do you use it? What's going on? It's the same type of thing that we saw before. And just like how it happened back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where a whole economic elite sprang forth in Palo Alto, you're going to see the same thing happen. And this is a perfect story written by Jonathan Long, or article, where it pretty much lays it out just like that. So let's break in. So as many economies slowly begin opening up again, their stability remains uncertain. 2020 will go down in history books as the year financial markets suffered their worst day since '87, and oil values went negative for the first time. Bitcoin continues to increase in popularity across the globe, particularly as emerging markets with populations counting billions began to recognize its potential. The COVID-19 pandemic has pulled the brakes in the world economy, with the U.S. Federal Reserve, the world's most powerful central bank, being left with no option but to print unlimited money from their magic money tree. Now, there's many debates about if this is actually going to start inflation or if we can print to infinity. Now, I don't think we can print to infinity, but there are different economists out there and different people talking about it like, hey, this is going to be okay and we're not going to have to pay for anything. I don't see it, but I am not an economist. But to me, it just makes no sense that we can print everything out of thin air and make it all work. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So anyhow, let's move on. The crisis won't be over when the pandemic ends, and it will reveal to the traditional financial system that there's a lot to learn. Just talking about that, there's going to be a lot of ripple effects that are going to happen as soon as this pandemic goes away. I was reading an article about different organizations, and different CEOs were interviewed, and they said, we've realized for a long time that we don't need as many staff as we have. We could get rid of, different people, but we didn't want to deal with it because, there's other things to do. But now with this pandemic, we've had to cut back, and those jobs aren't coming back. There was actually a study done in Chicago, and they took a look at it, and they said that 42% of a majority of jobs are not coming back in certain sectors. And it's alarming. So I think this is going to be huge effects moving forward. Anyhow, states here this year, Bitcoin will create a new economic class, and it's time for everybody to pay attention to it or miss out. I don't know about this year, but I can tell you as time moves on, I do see a niche being built out, not just for Bitcoin, but for cryptocurrency and digital assets. All right. So the moment the Federal Reserve announced infinite money and oil's value went into decline, the value of Bitcoin grew. People are beginning to realize that we can no longer continue relying on traditional forms of finance. For decades, indebtedness across the world has grown and asset bubbles have continued to enlarge. It appears we've learned nothing from the 2008 global financial crisis. This health crisis is the icing on the already crumbling cake that our society is built on. But with Bitcoin, 2020 could be a very different story. And I have to tell you, with central banks in charge and for what they do as far as like printing money and setting economic policy, you have seen a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, the banked and the unbanked. And it is time for things to move on. It's just like with information. In the very early days, information really was power. But with the internet, that changed everything because now you could have information at your fingertips. And just like back in the day, I remember when the internet was coming around and people would talk about it and they'd say, the government's never going to allow the internet because they want to control all the information. They want to control it, and they control it over in the newsrooms. They control it in the newspapers. There's no way the internet's going to come about and become big. And here we are. The same thing is being said about digital assets and cryptocurrencies. They're like, there's no way the government's going to allow this. Well, guess what? It's already happening. So cat's out the bag, and you can't really put the genie back in the bottle. Moving on. It states here, Tim Draper had merit when he said it will be Bitcoin, not banks and governments that save the day. So here's my question to you. Do you agree with that statement? Do you believe that Bitcoin and Bitcoin alone will save the day for everybody? Now, I think these are my thoughts, and I just look around and I see, I see friends, I see people that are interconnected, and I got to tell you, if the government and more importantly the Fed did nothing, then people would be starving, and there would be riots in the streets, and there would be riots across the entire nation in the U.S. Now, I can't speak for Australia and Europe and India and Canada and Mexico, but I assume it's kind of like the same thing. If your government did absolutely nothing and didn't actually start printing money or giving out money or doing what would be like a UBI, Universal Basic Income, or some form of stimulus, I think there would be a huge amount of problems. Now, moving forward, I do think the answer out of this is not to keep printing more money. And maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe it's all about, hey, cryptocurrency, digital assets, and to a lesser extent, Bitcoin could be an answer. But I will say this: it's a band-aid. All this stuff, all these stimulus packages, it's a band-aid for a much, much bigger problem. And I kind of looked at the economy and the growth and felt to myself, this can't go on forever. There's just no way. You can't keep going up. So I think it's a band-aid for a much bigger problem. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If that makes sense, or I was way off base. Just it's always interesting to read the comments. All right. So moving on, it says there is a very simple reason why Bitcoin is a reliable asset compared to traditional fiat. There is now officially an infinite amount of USD, but there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And that's the same for every other type of cryptocurrency. There's only so much that you can mint. It doesn't go on forever. Ethereum, I think, doesn't really, it kind of goes by some type of scale, but you can keep increasing Ethereum. XRP, 100 billion. EOS, 81 million, somewhere around there, I forgot. Cardano is in the billions, so there's a finite amount that can actually be put out. Now, I know I'm probably incorrect in some of those numbers, so just correct me in the comment section. And moving down, then let's finish this up. So in the last part, the crux of the whole article is this: the world is heading into dangerous territory. As the market slowdown is just getting started, the global economy hasn't seen anything like this since World War II. There will be more damage, and there will be more casualties, both figuratively and literally. Bitcoin needs to be used for the true purpose and function it was invented for, to safeguard people from the downfalls of the traditional global financial system. We can't continue relying on century-old forms of finance, where hyperinflation is used as a means of survival. Time to take back control. All right, here's my final thoughts, and let me know if you agree. I believe that digital assets and cryptocurrency can be all that. It can be the savior that we need it to be. It can upgrade the whole financial system. It can upgrade money, really, and a lot of other things. But Bitcoin by itself, it can't be the world's reserve currency. It just can't. Not in its present state. And we actually went over this in yesterday's video, where we took a look at Bitcoin transactions per second and how everything works with like the Lightning Network. And right now, as it stands, and I say this every time we talk about it, if Bitcoin was the only thing in place right now, let's just say something happened and all fiat money went away, and we could only use Bitcoin around the whole world, the infrastructure, the network would collapse and crumble faster than you can blink an eye as soon as everybody starts using it. It just wouldn't happen. It just doesn't happen like that. So like in its current state, when people are talking about using it as currency, there's no way. There's no way. There are way faster options, better technology out there that you can use as far as like currency. Now, as a store of value and things like that, I think it's fantastic. I think the new mantra should be, your savings account should be this: Bitcoin, gold, silver. It covers the bases for everything. And I don't see why not. Anyhow, I thought it was a fantastic article written by Jonathan Long, but there's just a couple of things that I can't find the middle ground with him on certain parts, but I do see a huge correlation of what happened in the past, what's happening right now, and what's going to happen in the future. All right, let's move on. Last up, CBDC development, and this was a pretty good. Grayscale always puts out great stuff. You know, Grayscale they have now 3.7 billion assets under management, and most of their buyers are for the Bitcoin Trust, and they have, I think it's 88% of institutional money and hedge funds are into this Bitcoin Trust, along with Ethereum Classic, XRP, and random other digital assets. So what this looked at was they're asking the question, you know, with all the increase in interest of central bank digital coins and everybody taking a look at it, will this lead to more, I guess, a better value or better recognition of Bitcoin? So let's break in. So I like this first couple sentences. It says CBDCs are sometimes viewed as synonymous to or as replacements for digital currencies like Bitcoin, but they represent a meaningful departure from the decentralized protocols inherent to many cryptos. CBDCs attempt to upgrade payment infrastructure, while Bitcoin is an attempt to upgrade money. And that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, you have a fiscal policy by the Fed and they can print whatever they want to, like we just talked about. But there's sometimes a problem with transferring money, getting money to people and everything else. So they're trying to fix that infrastructure problem. Bitcoin is trying to fix the actual fiscal policy of the whole system. So there's a big, huge difference there. Let's move on. Okay, so instead of reading this whole thing, I just broke it down into really just three pieces. The first part, this part, and then a little graph at the end. And this was pretty interesting to me. In January 2020, a survey of the Bank of International Settlements showed that nearly all central banks of advanced economies were actively analyzing the potential impact of stablecoins, and over 80% of respondents are working on a central bank digital coin. So all the different major countries out there and their central banks are working on a central bank digital coin. So if you don't think it's happening, and it's going to happen probably faster than we think. Let's move on. So this chart pretty much sums up the whole thing. And they took a look at Bitcoin and CBDCs and monetary policy. They said, look, Bitcoin's fixed and it's only 21 million. And CBDCs, it's determined by whoever the Fed is or whoever the policymaker is, and they can just print to infinity. Geography, Bitcoin is global. CBDCs, it's of course regional, depending on the country you're in. Storage, anyone can securely store it. That makes sense. CBDCs, it's determined by policymakers. They could be an app. It could be some other type of thing that they're going to use. Who knows? Transfer, anyone can transfer it. And CBDCs are my policymaker. Hours of operation, they said it's almost 24/7. CBDCs could be the same thing. So when I read this, at first I was like, okay, that all makes sense. But then I really started to think about it. You have to understand that Greyscale, their whole job, they're marketers, they're financial people, and their whole job is to make people realize that Bitcoin is it. So they want people to invest into it. So when they put this out and they compare Bitcoin to central bank digital coins, of course, it's going to be slanted towards Bitcoin because that's what they want people to believe. Now, I think, like we just talked about in the very first one, I think Bitcoin is going to do very well as a store of value. And unless some type of new technological advance comes about, which makes it more of a currency, you can't use it as a currency right now. It just doesn't happen, even with Lightning Network that we talked about. So all these things right here, if you had everything the same, Bitcoin would lose out to a central bank digital currency because of a couple reasons. First of all, for people like you and me that are watching this video, we agree that we don't want a lot of censorship. We don't want Big Daddy or Big Brother looking at us over our shoulder, checking out our every transaction. Of course, some people in the comment section are like, well, it already happens. They know everything. Sure, okay. But I can use cash and I can do a transaction and the government won't know about that because cash is cash. So with the CBDC, of course, they're going to be able to track you much more than they could. And could they sell your data? Possibly. I mean, they say they won't, but so did Facebook. And look what happened there. So as far as the philosophical question, then you and I, no, we probably wouldn't want to use it. However, the average person for the mass adoption is going to say, let me get this straight. So this money can just come to me. And it's super simple to get. I can use an app on my phone because I already have a phone, and that's great. And it's just everything's simplified for me. I'll do it. And that's what's going to happen. The one thing I do see as a problem is if you have a blockchain of, let's say, China's yuan, and then you have the digital euro, and you have the digital dollar and the digital peso, how do those blockchains talk to each other? I mean, there's only a couple of different cryptocurrencies I could think of that could be a bridge currency, XRP being one of them. Besides that, I mean, I don't see it going too far. And then just to talk about, like, if you wanted to use Bitcoin again as currency, you have to look at TPS, or transactions per second. And we talked about this yesterday, but it's the same thing. So Bitcoin right now is 7 transactions per second. 7. And if you run, I said this the same thing yesterday, 2017, if you had to use Bitcoin, the fees were astronomical because the infrastructure or the network, it was just so bogged down with people. It cost a lot of money just to move Bitcoin around. Whereas before it didn't, because not many people were using it. And you have Ethereum, Dash, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, PayPal, Ripple, or XRP, 1,500 transactions per second. Here's a Visa, the global standard right now, 24,000. So if you want to look at like payments and currency, I mean, you can use Ripple, or sorry, not Ripple is the company. XRP is the digital asset. You could use that, but I don't see the other way around. Now, I could be wrong, and the Lightning Network could be awesome, and then there's probably something on the pipe that could fix all this stuff, and Bitcoin transactions per second could be 100 million. I have no idea. But right now, it just doesn't work like that. I see it as great store of value. Like I said, Bitcoin, gold, silver, great, 3 great assets for your savings account. That's how I see it. All right, so let me know what you think in the comment section, if that was like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, or that makes sense, or somewhere in the middle. Love to hear it. And that's it for today's video. I would like to say one thing is that, gentlemen, this is Digital Dave. I watch some crypto YouTubers, and I always put in my description. Now that those recommendations change over time, but Crazy for Cryptos is the one that's pretty much stood. He doesn't put them out every day. It's every so often, but he had a great video about the Theta token, why it's ready to move. Look at this guy. Look at that shirt. Just for that shirt, you should watch the video. Anyhow, and he's really laid back. He lives in, I think, in Thailand, and like he's got the great intros and outros of the beach and all the time. It's awesome. But what he talks about Theta made a lot of sense, and maybe you should check it out. So I'll link at the very end, and I'll probably do more of that later on. Different YouTubers I like to watch, and if they have good video, and that's it. So before we take off, lastly, I want to say thanks to all my supporters. If you don't know, underneath there's a join button, and it should just be a tip button. I always had it, so it'll be a tip. But when you join, it's just a couple bucks, and it's like saying, hey, thanks for the video. And you got level 1. I thank everybody that did that. Level 2 pays a little bit more, and I give him a shout out. So, All Right Soft, myself, who else? Dave Plummer, the Straight Talking Guy. He's got a YouTube channel. Check him out. Grant Sharman. We've also got Bruce Wood. Great name. Baking Benjamins. Greater name. Noel Flippin Vegas. Martin Lewin. Michael Ralph. William Howell. And our new one, Chris Alexander. So, thanks everybody who are supporters. I really appreciate it. And that's it for today's video. Thanks for sticking with me.